Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast that gives new life to old books. Today, you find us in the Welsh Mountains on a rainy day in August, in a tent, at the Greenman Festival. As people run in from the rain, they're confronted by the sight of four people on stage with one thing in mind, to talk about a book that they love. I'm John Mitchinson, the publisher of Unbound, the website where people crowdfund the books they really want to read.
And I'm Andy Miller, the author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And what you're going to hear today is a recording of a live episode of Backlisted that we made at the Greenman Festival in Wales on Friday, August the 18th, 2023. In the middle of the afternoon, as John has suggested. You know, we got a good turnout, which might be partly because of the podcast and partly because it was really raining all day very heavily.
Greenman, in the most beautiful part of Wales, the Banon Prythinog, the place formerly known as the Brecon Beacons.
You know, we were warming up the crowd for The Comet is Coming from Now. And the headline is Devo from the Past during extremely challenging weather conditions. But we were delighted to have been asked to perform there. And,
we were.
So what you're going to hear on this tape, which was made through the desk at the show, is a conversation between four people about Barry Hines' novel A Kestrel for a Knave, made into a film by Ken Loach and Tony Garnett the following year as Kes.
Yeah, published in 1968 by Michael Joseph and then made into a film in 1969. Never been out of print.
And it's never been out of print,
Never been out of print.
Absolutely right. We felt that it would be a book that connected with the Greenman audience, and
so it proved.
So it proved. But before we listen to the recording, and I should just say, remember, this was recorded at a music festival, so you might hear some bleed through from the other stages at various points. We're going to do the housekeeping that we do on Backlisted, of telling you a bit about the author, and first of all, reading you the blurb off the first edition jacket. And I'm going to ask my colleague John Mitchinson to appraise this in his role as a publisher and aesthete. So this was what was put on the Michael Joseph jacket. And John, if Barry Hines didn't write this himself, I will eat a Kestrel. Yeah. This sounds like Barry to me. Anyway, here we go. Here's if for some incredible reason you have not read A Kestrel for a Knave, nor have you seen Kes, here is what this book is about when it was published. Barry Hines' first novel, The Blinder, received a notable round of applause in 1966. His second, A Kestrel for a Knave, shows a more subtle, more tender development of character and an unerring eye and ear for the environment of youth. It is the story of a boy and a bird, each apparently untamable, but deeply involved and dependent on one another. The knave of the title is Billy Casper. Not much beloved by anyone, and idling through his last year at school before probably joining his brother in the pits. His emergence as a human being seems effectively blocked by his mother, who is preoccupied with the men who serially frequent the house, and the indifference of all those around him who have little time for a stubborn, inarticulate boy. Life changes for Billy when he adopts and patiently trains a kestrel. Gradually, learning from books and from all the magpies, jays, and lesser birds he has kept before, he gains the kestrel's confidence until she will fly freely and return to his lure. Bringing her fierce and fearful nature into harmony with his own becomes an absorbing passion, making him more vulnerable than before. The outcome leaves the reader questioning and deeply caring how Billy will face the terrifying odds ahead.
Well, you have to say that is a very good blurb.
I'm going to say, Johnny, that's one of the best blurbs we've ever
I think
read
so.
on this thing.
I really think so.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
And Barry Hines, if you wrote that, wherever you now reside, thank you very much. Because if you haven't read or seen A Kestrel for Knave or Kess,
you have a treat in store.
Hopefully you now understand where this episode is coming from. And also, yes, indeed, you have a treat in store.
We should say that Barry Hines was a bit of background on him. He was, he came to prominence in the 1960s. His name is often connected with other writers that period, Alan Sillitoe in particular, as being a kind of working class novelist. He wrote 9 novels in the end, and they all are sort of set in and around, for the most part, South Yorkshire, which is where he was from.
Yes, he was born in Hoyland, near Barnsley in 1939, and he died in Hoyland near Barnsley.
He did indeed.
2016,
and he spent time. He didn't go down the pit, but he did work briefly as an apprentice mining surveyor in the pit. Unlike Billy Casper, he was a bit of a star student. He was also an extraordinary athlete, which we do mention in the podcast. He played athletics. He represented, I think, Yorkshire Athletics, but he played football for Barnsley and for Crawley Town. But then became a teacher, and I think it was out of his teaching experience combined with the experience of his brother, Richard, who had kept a kestrel, that the story for Kes came about, and it was a success. The film came out the next year and made it even more of a success. It sold over 2 million copies. The great Bard of Barnsley has said about a former guest on the podcast has said about A Kestrel for a Knave. For people who come from South Yorkshire and Barnsley in particular, is our Moby Dick, our Things Fall Apart, our Great Gatsby. So. And it has been the book, I think, that more or less defined Barry Hines' career.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I want to say also, firstly, Ken Loach made 3 films in collaboration with Barry Hines.
He did.
A Kestrel for a Knave, The Gamekeeper in 1975, and Looks and Smiles in 1981. But it clearly is A Kestrel for a Knave, which is the one which lives on in the British public imagination.
Yeah.
And I also want to just acknowledge that after Barry Hines died, we talked about his career on Backlisted, and I read his 3rd novel, which is called First Signs. If you go back and find that episode, which using our website you will be able to, backlisted.fm, you'll hear me saying, this isn't a very good book, First Signs. And I feel really guilty, Johnny, now, having revisited Kestrel for Knave and also looking at the overview of Barry Hines' other work, that when we I haven't changed my mind. First Signs is not a very good book, but it is not representative of Hines's vision or his talent. And this is a really lovely opportunity to redress that balance for me, anyway. I'd also like to point out that Hines went on, firstly, in addition to writing the novels John has talked about, he also wrote the screenplay of Threads.
Yeah, he did.
Which, if that was the only thing he'd ever done, Threads, which was a BBC film shown in 1984 about the probable effects of a nuclear strike on a major city, if that was the only thing he'd ever done, he'd be a culturally significant figure. But the fact that he had the range to write a best-selling novel, write a film script that was the basis of one of the most beloved British films of the last 60, 70 years, that he wrote plays that were produced at the Royal Court. He was that thing we always look for on Backlisted, the real thing. He was a working writer.
Yeah.
And he loved being a working writer. And it's partly for that reason we were so pleased to welcome both Rose Blake and Bob Stanley, who you'll hear me introduce on the actual live recording, because they bring such different perspectives on A Kestrel for a Knave as a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
We'll say a bit after you've heard the discussion about how it felt talking about this book on stage in Wales, at Greenman, in that place. Johnny, is there anything else you think we need to say before we get into it?
Yeah, just as linking back to our last podcast, Summer Reading Special, Catherine Taylor, whose memoir I talked about, The Stirrings, she was an extra in Threads, and writes about that in the books.
Was she?
Small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it. Andy.
Good Lord. Right, okay. Here we are. You're joining us live at the Greenman Festival in Wales.
Smell the mud, hear the rain.
Behind us on the big screen is projected the famous photograph of Billy Casper flicking everyone in that tent the V's. As is Nikki, our producer, I'm going to ask, do we need to explain the phrase flicking the V's from other people around the world?
No, I think we should just let it lie. It's a nice anglicised thing. You can just figure it out.
All right, yeah. It's not, ironically, in given the subject of A Kestrel for a Knave, flipping the bird. It's a very different gesture. But if you're not familiar with it, listeners in other countries, just Google the phrase A Kestrel for a Knave, Billy Casper, and you will see what we mean.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and Michelob Ultra is getting you closer to the game than ever with courtside seats and more. Enter now at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access Courtside 2024 to 2025 sweepstakes. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Ends on July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/superior access/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Hey, are you a member?
What do you mean?
Are you a member of the library?
I don't know about that. I know the book on parking, that's all.
Well, you have to be a member to take a book out.
Well, I only want one.
Well, have you filled one of these forms in?
No.
Well, you're not a member then. You have to take one of these home first for your father to sign.
My dad's away.
Well, you can wait till he comes back home, can't you?
I don't mean that. I mean, he's left home.
Oh, I see. Well, in that case, your mother will have to sign it for you.
I bet she's at work, and she'll not be home till tea time, and it's Sunday tomorrow.
There's no rush, is there?
I've never broke a book, you know. I haven't tore it all.
Well, look at your hands. They're absolutely filthy. We'll end up with dirty books that way.
I don't read dirty books.
I should hope you don't read dirty books. You're not old enough to read dirty books.
My mum knows one of the people who works here, you know. That'll help, won't it?
No, that doesn't help at all. You still have to have the back signed. To be a member, you'll have to have somebody over 21 who is on the borough electoral roll to sign it for you.
Ah, well, I'm over 21.
You're not over 21.
But I vote.
You don't vote. You're not old enough to vote.
I vote for my mum. She don't like voting, so I do it.
Just have to wait for it, won't you?
Where would I find a book then? In a shop, like?
Well, you'd have to go down the street. There's a second-hand bookshop there. You'll find some down there.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Dave. Welcome to Backlisted. The podcast gives new life to old books. It's really fantastic to be here at the Greenman Festival in Wales, talking about Barry Hines and A Kestrel for a Knave. So we're joined by two guests today. They are Rose Blake and Bob Stanley. Rose works as a freelance illustrator in London. She has illustrated many picture books, including A History of Pictures for Children by David Hockney and Martin Gayford. She very luckily grew up opposite a library and has been obsessively reading ever since. She published Egg and Spoon, her first piece of writing, last year with Rough Trade, and is currently working/struggling on her next written project. Yes, that's the nature of the beast. We're also joined by Bob Stanley. Since 1987, Bob Stanley has written about music for publications including The Face, Smash Hits, NME, The Guardian, The Times, The LA Times, and The Paris Review. He is a member of the Mercury-nominated pop group Saint Etienne and has written two acclaimed pop music histories that span the 20th century. Yeah, 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 The Story of Modern Pop, Faber 2013, and Let's Do It, The Birth of Pop, Faber 2022, which won the 2023 Penderyn Prize. His latest book, The Bee Gees, Children of the World, is published by 9/8 and is available on the bookstall next door. I want to get straight to it then with A Kestrel for a Knave. Rose?
Yes.
When did you first read A Kestrel for a Knave by Barry Hines?
I think it was in 2002. So I was 14 and I just got it out from my local library and I reread it last week and it was a totally different experience of reading.
What way?
In the way that I read it just as a story when I was a 14-year-old. I read it as a boy who finds a hawk and the hawk dies. And I read it so much more recently as it's a book about society and it's a book about politics and it's a book about so many other various things.
Yeah. Bob, when did you read the book or see the film?
I read the book at school when I was 12 or 13, I think. But I saw the film when I was 5. It's the first film I ever saw at the cinema, and it was the support film for The Jungle Book. I went to Res Hill Odeon with my mum, and she didn't know what Kes was. It was a brand new film at the time, and she was obviously horrified. Much as to her yesterday, she's like, "Oh no!" And she can't remember covering my eyes, but I couldn't work out why. But I really loved the look and feel of the film, weirdly. I mean, I obviously completely missed everything that was going on. I just saw the landscapes and thought Billy looked cool. And that was, my main takeaway from that film.
What was the first film you ever saw in the cinema, Rose?
Oh, God. I can't remember. Probably like The Lion King or The Little Mermaid or something like that.
Yeah, mine was Dougal and the Blue Cat. We were just saying, Dougal and the Blue Cat is a very psychedelic text, and Kes really isn't. John was saying it's the least psychedelic novel of the 1960s.
Yeah, Penguin have put an interesting new jacket on it, which is by Alan Jones, the 60s. Well, he's still, I think, alive. But he came to prominence in the 60s. And it's a very psychedelic, pretty abstract-looking jacket. It seems like it's, brave.
Yeah.
Given the content.
And you, John, you have a special connection with this novel, don't you?
Well, I have a special connection in that I read it when I was about 9, and that was about the time I was completely into bird watching. And I was excited to discover that the Young Ornithologists Club back in 1917, I think it was, their little badge, you get a little badge if you join, and it was a little kestrel. And somehow the memory of reading the book and I was obsessed with, I wanted my parents to give me falconry lessons.
my parental situation wasn't quite as bad as Billy Casper's, but it was met with fairly round contempt. Was it? What? Falconry? Where are we going to find? And in fact, I did find a place where you could go and. I mean, it wasn't. I couldn't actually learn how to do it, but I could hold a hawk, and that memory, the first time I've had a hawk on my wrist, and the feeling of incredible lightness but incredible strength when they fly away and they come back, really live with me for life. And I'm totally. It was a few years before I actually saw the film, but the book had really kind of hit a very, very deep. I mean, I think anybody who's grown up with, as I did, my early years were spent up in the industrial northeast, and getting out into the fields and being and finding nature out there was really important. So yeah, but a bit like you, Rose, going back to it, I haven't read it since I was 9. So and there was huge bits that I'd forgotten in this novel that really blew me away this time around.
Rose, well, you said that you found it different when you read it, to what you remembered. And you are significantly younger than the older gentlemen gathered on this stage. So you don't remember when the world was quite like that.
No.
And so did it feel dated to you?
No, not at all. It's about, my main take from the book was that it's about the way that people are treated, and it's about the fact that this boy is just, his life is cruel. Everything about his life is cruel. And you can't train a hawk using cruelty. It's impossible to train a hawk using cruelty. So that was the main thing that I took from it, was this idea of this boy that's up against everything. His mum, his brother, his teachers, everything in his life is just cruel to him, but he can escape into this world of the hawk, which, I mean, if you tried to train a hawk with cruelty, it just wouldn't happen. So it's a universal thing, isn't it? I think it's a very timeless idea there.
Bob, could you identify with it, despite coming from the Croydon area?
Well, no, I mean, if I said I identified with Billy Casper, I think it'd be a bit of a stretch. But yeah, certainly. I mean, I didn't enjoy school at all, and I didn't feel like I was getting any education there. It's pretty commonplace in schools now, I think. But I was literally being trained to do exams, and clearly, as I wasn't going to get into university, I was just like shunted to the back. So I could definitely relate to that. Rereading it now, I mean, I think I kind of worked this out when I read it the first time around, but it's like, it's clearly a very political book, and it's kind of dryness, it's sort of spare language is there to like make you realise it's a political book. And I certainly didn't get that from the film when I was 5.
And I certainly think it's true, John. Tony Garnett, Ken Loach's producer, and Loach himself, the first thing they ever say about Kess, if they're asked about it now, is it's a political film.
Yeah.
If you watch it and think it's a film only about a boy and his bird, you're not watching it right. You know, it's a film about the system, whatever you want to call the system in this context. I mean, I can remember reading it, and I couldn't see the center of it. I kind of root for Billy Casper, but why am I being denied certain kinds of narrative closure? You were telling me what they wanted to do in the film adaptation, or some producers wanted to do.
Yeah, apparently it was not an easy film. Got to remember, it's Barry Hines' first novel, and it's Ken Loach's first feature film. Very early. So it wasn't a shoo-in to get money, and there was one producer came and looked at it and said, yeah, well, what we really want is we want Judd, the brother, to actually be the partner of the mother, and in a rage he kills the mother, and then Billy Casper runs and disappears, and Mr. Farthing spends time searching the streets of distant towns, finally finds Billy Casper, brings him back and gets him a job in a zoo. And Barry Hines said, well, he said, we found that scenario quite easy to resist. And eventually United Artists did come and fund the film. But yeah, I mean, I think you would imagine, we'll maybe talk about the differences in a minute, but the differences between the film and the book, because they are quite marked. There are some marked differences, although pretty much all the dialogue in the film comes from the novel. And Tony Garnett and Ken Loach said they felt slightly sheepish later that they'd got screenwriting credits when really it should have been Barry Hines because he.
Yeah.
Rose, I wonder whether you could. We were talking about what the prose, how spare the prose is. I wonder if you could read us a small section from the novel, so people who haven't read it can see the restraint with which.
I mean, I'm actually going
tells his story.
read quite a floral bit.
Do it.
Which cuts.
I found that there's this juxtaposition in the book massively between this really spare language and then these scenes where things are noticed, like a silver birch is noticed when he's being pained, and there are various things that Billy. I feel that's the inner interior of Billy, maybe, and it almost makes it so much more difficult to bear the cruelty because he's got this inner world of noticing a thrush and stroking its back. Anyway, he's in a big fight in the school playground and he's pushed into a coal heap. He's being bullied, and he washes his hands after the fight. And this is just a description of him washing his hands. Okay, it says, a tap had been left running and its flow was powerful enough to maintain a whirlpool in the bottom of the sink. Billy plugged the next sink and ran the hot water, tempering it with cold water and testing it until the bowl was well filled. He pushed his sleeves up to his elbows and immersed both hands. The level in the bowl rose and the displaced water escaped down the overflow. Billy leaned on his arms, his hands moulded to the shape of the bowl, and as the steam drifted up about his face, he closed his eyes and smiled like the Bisto Kid. He bent over the bowl and slowly dipped to his face, held it, and made the water boil by blowing into it. He stood up, shaking his face and wiping the water from his eyes. Then he lathered his hands from a bottle of liquid soap and fouled the water by rinsing them. He lathered them again, made an O with the forefinger and thumb of his right hand, and blew gently on the membrane gathered there. It blossomed to a bubble, the spectrum curving in its skin as it left his hand and floated quietly towards the floor. He reached out to take it back, touched it, gone. He blew some more, but they came out small, so he let them drift and time their own oblivion. Then, out it came, a jewel, hanging heavy in the air. He reached out to catch it. It bounced off the buff of air, then wavered in the suction as he withdrew his hand. He followed it, and as it fell, he placed his hand below it, allowing his hand to fall more slowly than the bubble, so that slowly, very slowly, the bubble fell closer to his hand. Falling, bubble over hand, both falling, until finally the bubble landed gently on the falling palm. Billy eased them to a halt and stood up, smiling. He tilted his hand and shifted his head to catch the colours from different angles and in different lights, and while he was looking, it vanished, leaving him looking at a lathered palm.
Amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it? That is just amazing. I mean, it's a moment of Billy's, it's Billy's soul in this.
And this is a man who didn't read a novel until he was 21. I mean, I do think the Hines' story is incredible. I mean, he grew up reading comics. There were no books in the house, and he was staying. I think he was in digs with an English graduate when he was teaching, and he said, "Have you got any books I could read?" And his friend, thinking, "I'll find him the thinnest book I can find," found him a copy of Animal Farm, and from that moment onwards, that was it. He just read and read and read, and I think people often compare his style that he was influenced by Hemingway, but honestly, there is. One of the great things about this book is there's so much more, really extraordinary writing than even the film would suggest that there would need to be for the story.
And some of the sentences...
Really rich book.
Some of the sentences are almost like a haiku. I just got one in the notebook, which I'll just quickly read, which it just says, a call, an echo, an empty yard, a sheet of paper captured against the wire by the wind. I mean, that as a sentence is just like, oh, so good.
Bob, you said that you read the book when you were at school.
Yeah.
Because it was on the curriculum, wasn't it? And
it would have been by the late 70s, which is not that long after it was published, I suppose. And I think you were saying earlier, Barry Hines is still angry about the lack of working class writers or on school curriculums. But I think the reason that I learned about the Chartists and Peterloo at school and things like Billy Liar were on our English curriculum would have been largely down to Kes and that generation of writers coming through and being unignorable. And I think those things probably aren't on the curriculum anymore. Certainly not the history parts aren't. Because
definitely, Kestrel for a Knave definitely isn't any.
It is.
It isn't.
It isn't really. Wow.
I think one of the things I was really surprised about going back to this book, I would be very interested. I'm going to ask a question of the many teachers gathered in this audience in a minute. I was really surprised at how much of this book, you might think it's about class consciousness, or you might think it's about training a kestrel, but I can't think of a better British novel about British schools. Even though it was written nearly 60 years ago, that there does not seem to be a rich vein of. Rose was saying, well, there's Grange Hill, but that's not a novel. I mean, there's not a kind of socialist realist tradition of writing about how horrible children can be to one another and how horrible, inadvertently perhaps, or deliberately, teachers can be to students. I wonder, are there any teachers here who have taught Kes?
One at the back, yes. What luck. You're right at the very back and I can't hear you. Give me a thumbs up if they enjoyed it. They loved it. Round of applause.
Yeah.
I loved it.
But one of the reasons I think it was Barry Hines himself said he used to like reading it. School kids loved it because of the swearing.
Yeah,
he said it was literally everybody would read. He said often these were classrooms where kids had not had stories read to them since they were very young. And Kes was the thing that unlocked reading. Kestrel for a Knave was the thing that unlocked reading for them because they were all sitting there waiting to say, "Bastard."
You twat.
Our friend Frank Cottrell Boyce says something very similar in a foreword that he wrote to an edition of Kes, where he says, what are stories for? One of the best loved scenes in A Kestrel for a Knave comes when Mr. Farthing asks Billy to help him illustrate the difference between fact and fiction by telling the story of the first time he flew Kes. The teacher's gentle prodding finally unlocks a soaring poetry in Billy, and for a moment, we and his classmates see the boy's true potential as, like a falcon, he takes flight. The lesson ends with the boys being told to write some fiction. Billy's tall tale turns out to be a simple account of an unremarkable, pleasant day, a day when he had chips and beans for tea. All the teachers were polite to him, and, a heartbreaking detail, the stairs were carpeted. The fact that Billy sees stair carpets and respect as unobtainable fantasies tells you all you need to know about his losses and his hopes. What are stories for? Stories are lies that tell the truth.
Well, thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. And I believe, as if by magic, Bob, we have Billy's tall tale here, don't we?
Oh, thanks, yeah. One day I woke up and my mother said to me, "Here, Billy, there's your breakfast in bed for you." There was bacon and egg and bread and butter and a big pot of tea. When I had my breakfast, the sun was shining outside, and I got dressed and went downstairs. We lived in a big house up Moor Edge, and we had carpets on the stairs, in the hall, and central heating. When I got down, I said, "Where's our Judd?" "He's going the army," my mother said, "and he's not coming back." "But your dad's coming back instead." There was a big fire in the room, and my dad came in carrying his case that he took away with him. I haven't seen him for a long time, but he was just the same as when he went away. I was glad he'd come back, and our Judd had gone away. When I got to school, all the teachers were good to me. They said, "Hello, Billy. How are you going on?" And they all patted me on the head and smiled. And we did interesting things all day. When I got home, my mother said, "I'm not going to work anymore." And we all had chips and beans for tea. And then we got ready and we all went out to the pictures. We went upstairs and had ice cream at the intervals. And then we all went home and had fish and chips for supper, and then we went to bed. So that's Billy's dream day.
there's a heartbreaking detail, always the detail, where Billy runs to the mother for comfort, and she's embarrassed to demonstrate any physical affection to him. The mother, who in the film is played by the Coronation Street actress Lynn Perry, who was not a professional actress at that time. Did you know that? She goes into Corrie because of being in Kes. So, Rose, what is it about... let's just move to the film for a moment. What is it about the film that... I think your microphone is dead.
Hello.
What is it about the film that continues to speak to people? It's still Ken Loach's most famous and most beloved film. What is it? What is the thing in it that continues to speak to us?
I think there are lots of things, but I think one of the things is this idea of someone that Billy doesn't have a voice at all. And when he's asked to describe the hawk, he can't. His teacher describes the feeling of it. I feel that it's this idea of everyone has a thing inside them that is imagination or magic or love or humanness. And that's what the film shows in Billy and Kes. It's this idea of, even though everything is against you, you've got this Kes with you, or I don't know, it's like, it's kindness and humanness. And
yeah, I would like to read you the strapline on the film poster for Kes when it was first issued, and then ask you to answer a simple question, and we'll just go along. They beat him. They deprived him. They ridiculed him. They broke his heart, but they couldn't break his spirit. True or false?
False.
Bob?
False.
John?
Yeah. I mean, false. I don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It's interesting to speculate what happens to Billy after the end of the film.
How many people think Kes, I'm going to show of hands, is a hopeful film? One man there, an outlier. Thank you, sir. How many people think Kes is a hopeless film? How many people have no strong opinions on this question? Yes, many of you. Excellent.
I think the film is more. I think the film is bleaker than the book in a way.
Because?
Because I think there is an inner life in the book that Billy has, which, through the language that Hines gives him, which you just can't get. So, for example, the really important bit Bob read earlier, they couldn't put that in the film. They tried it. They tried him writing the letter, and I had a camera over his shoulder, but it just went on too long. But that letter is very important because there's another major bit of that's not in the film, which is where he breaks into an empty cinema right at the end after he's looking for Kes. And he sits and he literally projects a kind of a film from his imagination onto the screen, and sitting there with his dad. And you could argue that by the time he gets home, finds the bird, buries it, and then goes to bed, which is that going to bed, but that actually he has begun to develop some inner strength that will see him through whatever it is he does next. Probably not getting an apprenticeship, but I think that's one of the differences between fiction and films. You kind of, when you see it's almost unbearable, the film, the ending where he buries the bird and then goes in. It's very, very bleak.
I think I agree with the gentleman who said it was a hopeful film. I think, and book, I think there is a very important moment near the end of the book where Judd has killed the bird, and Billy looks to his mother to say, what are you going to do about this? You should do something. Is he going to get away with this? And she says she won't do anything. And it seems to me that's very important, that there is a moment of what you might call a bit awareness, I suppose. Awareness of the system. I agree with you. I think the film is more closed.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's because you can't, as Rose said, you can't get Billy's kind of internal life on film. So it's much bleaker. And I think, the fact it looks like a black and white film. It's not a black and white film. It gives the impression of being a black and white film. Everything about it is very dour, apart from the Brian Glover sequence, which is funny.
We've been holding that. Yeah.
There's the ending is very, it seems very final to me. That's what I get from the book. Is like, everything's stacked against him, and it's like he's obviously, poetic soul, and is that going to come out in his life, or is he just going to end up with like a working down a mine or whatever? And I would say at the end of the film, you don't think he's going to pull through and become an author or whatever, or ornithologist.
Whereas perhaps in the novel, there's a sense that someone with that imagination, someone with that sensitivity, and someone with that realization of what it takes to outwit the system, perhaps can do it, perhaps.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a glimmer of hope there. Rose, I would really like to ask you about the scene with Brian Glover as the games teacher.
Okay.
How many people here think he seems like a really good bloke? No one. Good. You could tell this is Greenman and everybody got picked last for games. Good.
Hines was a games teacher.
I know, but, we can forgive him that. So that scene in the film plays for laughs.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't in the novel, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, we were chatting backstage and we both had particularly sadistic PE teachers, I think. And for me, it's just, it takes me back to that place of coming last in PE, the PE teacher making you run round the thing when all the rest of the class is finished. It's torturous, that scene in the book. It's really torturous, but it's hammed up massively in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny in the film.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's slightly watering down the message, and the message is what you see in microcosm on the football field is the same system that you see playing out in the school at large and in society.
Yeah, just
the system is rigged by...
Yeah, the PE teacher just wins. He gives himself the penalty. He, everything is his game and he's the ref. So he just, he chooses that his team's going to win, and then it doesn't. And that's when that horrible shower scene.
Yeah. But Bob, you like football.
Yes.
You've read his first novel. So his first novel is about a footballer.
Yeah,
The Blinder.
Yeah. It's I haven't read it for a long time. I haven't read it immediately before this, but I remember really enjoying it. And again, it's very hard, but it's realistic. I can't think of a better football novel I've read. I mean, it's one of those things like, books about fictional bands, so they tend to be, why would you do that when there's the real thing exists? You can read a book about a footballer or a real band. But The Blinder is very good.
There's a good baseball novel, Don DeLillo, Underworld.
Oh, right.
That is the best bit of sports writing I've ever.
Some good boxing novels. Ross Ray's and the Natural is another good football novel.
Well, I'm gonna. My first book, which was published about 20 years ago, is a book about what it means to be a man in this country if you don't like sport. So I'm going to read this bit. This is when they pick the team for football. I think this is the best description I've ever read of what it feels like as your classmates drift away from you and you're left standing on your own on the touchline. Right then, stop moaning and start picking. I'll have Anderson. He turned away from Tibbet and pointed to a boy who was standing on one of the intersections of the centre circle and the halfway line. Anderson walked off this cross and stood behind him. Tibbet scanned the line, considering his choice. I'll have Purdy. Come on then, Ellis. Each selection altered the structure of the line. When Tibbet had been removed from the centre, all the boys sidestepped to fill the gap. The same happened when Anderson went from near one end. But when Purdy and Ellis, who had been standing side by side, were removed, the boys at their shoulders stood still, therefore dividing the original line into two. These new lines were swiftly segmented as more boys were chosen, leaving no trace of the first major division, just half a dozen boys looking across spaces at each other, reading from left to right. A fat boy, an arm's length away, two friends, one tall with glasses, the other short with a hair lip. Then a space of 2 yards, and Billy. A boy space away from him, a thin boy with a crew cut and a spotty face. And right away from these, at the far end of the line, another fat boy. Spotty Crewcut was halfway between the two fat boys. Therefore, half of the length of the line was occupied by 5 of the boys. The far fat boy was the next to go, which halved the length of the line, and left Spotty Crewcut as one of the end markers. Tibbet then selected the tall friend with glasses. Mr. Sugden immediately selected his partner. They separated gradually as they walked away from the line, parting finally to enter their respective teams, and then there were 3. Fatty, Billy, and Spotty Crewcut, blushing across at each other while the captains considered. Tibbet picked Crewcut. He dashed forward into the anonymity of his team. Fatty stood grinning. Billy stared down at the earth. After long deliberation, Mr. Sugden chose Billy, leaving Tibbet with Hobson's choice. But before either Billy or Fatty could move towards their teams, Mr. Sugden was already turning away and shouting instructions. It's such a brilliant kind of whittling down, expose the weak, show them in front of everybody, and then just ignore them.
And Brian Glover, I mean, is so can't help feeling that the Fast Show's competitive dad was basically based on that whole scene where he's knocking the kids out of the way in order to score.
So just to wrap up then, I'd like to ask each of you, what is it about A Kestrel for a Knave that means we should still be reading it now? Even though the world is superficially a different place, what is it about this novel that continues to speak to people? And, you know, I hope if you haven't read it, you might go from here, find a copy, and discover this whole world laid out before you. Bob, what do you think it is that keeps it alive?
Well, I don't think the world is a very different place, for one thing. So I think it still seems, I mean, yeah, superficially it is, but yeah, people haven't got jobs down mines. But I mean, it's very relatable. How it's about sort of power systems in class system in Britain, very obviously, is still very much there. And I think schools now seem to be entirely guided towards exam success and not real education, which is obviously what many school is. Not about exam success, but just trying to shun kids into the mines or industrial jobs around Barnsley. So I think it's very relatable, but yeah, really it's about the language. I mean, just from the bits we've read today, I think it's pretty clear that he has it's just beautifully written. It's very, very, it's very minimal, but yeah, it's kind of like Japanese poetry almost. It's just describing washing hands or a line dividing and subdividing. It's almost like he's writing about it's about detail, but it's almost it's like some scientific kind of poetry, really. But the language is very there's nothing florid, ever. It's very, very simple. The language is very simple and it's beautiful to read.
Rose,
I'm just going to keep it really short. I would say it's about finding light in darkness, or finding grace in, it's about having a glimpse of something in a world that can be really hard and dark. There's always a way of finding some kind of light. I don't know.
Yeah. John?
I think all of those things, I think that sense of something wild, just read the tiny little bit that he says, which is kind of iconic bit in the book, where he says, look, I know, so that's why it makes me mad when I take her out and I hear somebody say, look, there's Billy Casper there with his pet hawk. I could shout at him, it's not a pet. Sir, hawks are not pets. Or when folks stop me and say, is it tame? Is it heck tame? It's trained, that's all. It's fierce and it's wild and it's not bothered about anybody, not even about me, right? And that's why it's great. And that is, if there is a spirit of indomitability in Billy Casper, it's that understanding that the bird is wild, even if he is not, even if his life is constrained on all language. It's a really profound and beautiful novel, really is.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we have to go. Thank you so much for being such a lovely audience and for listening to us and for listening to the work of Barry Hines.
Thanks to Rose. Keep going. Thanks to Rose, Blake, Thanks to Bob Stanley. Thanks to John Mitchinson. I'm Andy Miller. Thanks, Barry Hines. Thank you. So there we go. There we all were.
It was massive fun, I think. It was very nice to be in an audience where a lot of people had obviously read the book and seen the film. There was a real warmth that was sort of radiating off the audience. And at the beginning, we also asked if there were teachers, and there were quite a few teachers in the audience, because the book, for many years, it's no longer on the national curriculum, I think we said in the podcast, but it was a book that was taught. And for a lot of children, I think, was a book that, because it's got swearing in it and stuff, it was an exciting moment in their reading lives. So yeah, it was a really, really good. It was a warm and happy occasion.
I was thrilled we were discussing the book in front of an audience. I mean, on one level, I felt it was quite an obvious choice, but sometimes the obvious choice is the right choice, and the general affection for not just Kes, but the book and the film and the music, and it's a really important piece of British culture, even if you know nothing else about Ken Loach or Barry Hines or John Cameron or the actors in the film, or people feel this connection with it.
Absolutely. I think it's a book that people do feel very connected to, and I think we all talked about that in our own ways. But I think it is a very important book in the development of working class literature in this country, because it's a book that has lasted, as we've said before. It sold and sold and sold and continues to sell. But somehow the question mark over what happens to Billy Casper, would Billy Casper have fared any differently today? As we think we said in the podcast, those things are still unresolved. It's what makes it a great and lasting work of art.
The sense we've gone backwards
is
from
quite strong,
an already
isn't it?
unfortunate position is pretty strong, I think, when you read the novel. Now, I mean, I can only say I went into making this episode feeling, I thought I knew like all the best episodes, I thought I knew what I was getting into, but the energy provided to me by actually reconnecting with the book was a powerful one. And to find that shared by the guests on stage and people in the audience was a really special thing. So I hope some of that comes over. And I will also add, as a final note, that Barry Hines, notwithstanding he's no longer with us, has a new novel out next year.
How?
Well, he finished it in 2002.
It's
only now it's being published. It's called Springwood Stars.
Yeah.
I don't know who's publishing. I think it might be And Other Stories, who've brought The Gamekeeper back into print recently. But I think there's a job of work to do to acknowledge A Kestrel for Knave as Barry Hines' most important book. I mean, he would no doubt have agreed with that, but at the same time, there's a whole other body of work that is sitting there waiting to be rediscovered. So although we went the obvious route this time, there are all those other books out there that you could find and read and discover more about a really important author. Johnny, is there anything we want to say about how important it is that people check out our Patreon?
By all means, visit our Patreon. And that for the price of some fish scraps at Casper's Fish and Chip Shop in Hoyland Common, which, to be honest, still it does exist. It is called Casper's, and you can buy fish scraps there. You can get a subscription to on the lock listener level for 2 extra podcasts a month.
It's where we talk about what we've been reading this week, right? We've moved
books
that section.
It's true.
We?
It's where we talk about what we've been reading this week. So
if you want like new books as well as old books.
Yeah. You get to hear from that mysterious female voice belonging to Nikki Birch, our producer.
Sometimes who butts in every now and then.
Yeah, she's there. There's a whole lot more of her on Lot Listed. So
worth paying a few quid a month for.
If you want more Nikki and no ads, you can subscribe through our Patreon. That's it, though, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed it. We didn't get any feedback from self-esteem or Lankum about whether we'd warmed the crowd up for them, but I think we did. I think it was okay.
I felt that Jockstrap definitely benefited.
Oh, if you want to hear two old men discussing how good Jockstrap were at a music festival, make sure you subscribe to Longlisted, because we have major news to bring from the midlife audience.
We have much to say, do we not, Andy? Much to say.
much to say. Thanks very much, everybody, and
thanks for listening, everybody.
What a treat to do this book. What an absolute treat to do this book. So
do read it, please read it. It really is a masterpiece.